All ignorance, the ignorance of the educated, is the most dangerous. Not only are educated people likely to have more influence, they are the last people to suspect that they don't know what they are talking about when they go outside their narrow fields. The strategic location of the intelligentsia, whether in the mass media or in educational institutions, enables them to filter what information gets through to the general public, protecting the welfare state vision and with it, a flattering vision of themselves. The opposite of intellect is dullness or slowness, but the opposite of wisdom is foolishness, which is far more dangerous.
Ever feel like you were totally sure about something and then it turns out you were like completely wrong?
Oh, yeah.
Like maybe you were even explaining it to somebody else with confidence and then it's like, oh wait, I'm the one who got it all mixed up.
Happens all the time.
Yeah. So that's kind of what we're diving into today. It's all about how even education, even intelligence itself can kind of lead us down the wrong path.
It's tricky like that.
It really is. So we're looking at this excerpt today, and it jumps right into this idea of educated ignorance.
Okay.
And it even goes as far as to say that the ignorance of the educated is the most dangerous.
Interesting.
It is a bold statement.
It is.
So help me out here. What makes this kind of ignorance so concerning?
Well, I think the thing about it is we tend to equate knowledge with, like the more you know, the less likely you are to make a mistake.
Right. But sometimes knowledge can actually create blind spots. And that's what's really interesting about this.
Okay.
So you can think about somebody who's really, really specialized in their field. They know, like, everything about this one tiny little niche, but then they might step outside that area of expertise and have this kind of false confidence.
Oh, they're used to being the expert.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because they're seen as smart in general, their opinions carry weight, even if they're just like totally off base in that area.
It's almost like they're blinded by their own, what they already know.
Yeah, and their own authority, too.
Yeah.
People just assume, oh, you must be right because you're so smart.
You're usually right.
Right.
Exactly. And this excerpt that we're looking at, it points out the intelligentsia. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you got it. Okay, good. Because sometimes I stumble over these words. But, academics, media figures, those sorts of folks and how they kind of play into this whole thing. What's the thought there?
Well, because they're in those positions of influence, it's almost like they become these filters for information.
Yeah.
For the rest of society.
They decide what we see.
Kinda, yeah. And how we see it, too.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, what they choose to emphasize or downplay or even just totally ignore it all has this impact on how everybody else is perceiving these issues.
So they have a lot of power.
They do.
Even if they don't mean to, I mean.
Right, and that's the thing. Like, it's not always intentional. Like, you can think about, say, a news outlet that consistently highlights studies that support a certain viewpoint.
Right.
While they're kind of burying any research that contradicts it.
Oh, so it's like they're only presenting one side of the story.
Exactly. And it creates this echo chamber.
Yeah.
And then people aren't getting exposed to the full range of information. And that can really lead to some misguided beliefs.
That makes total sense. And so then on top of all that, this excerpt makes this really interesting distinction between intellect and wisdom.
Oh, yeah.
It even says that foolishness is the opposite of wisdom and not a lack of intelligence.
Yeah.
So break that down for me. How can you be smart but not wise, and what's the big deal here?
I think that's such a great point. And I think a lot of people confuse those two things, right?
Yeah.
Like you think, oh, if you're smart, you're wise. But it doesn't really work that way, does it?
Not necessarily.
No, not necessarily.
So how do you separate them?
Well, so you've got intellect, which is really your capacity for knowledge, your ability to learn things, to understand information.
Okay.
Whereas wisdom is more about how you apply that knowledge.
So it's more than just book smarts.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's about using your knowledge in a way that's actually effective and ethical.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really key part of it.
Ethical? Like, what do you mean?
Well, it's not enough to just know stuff.
Yeah.
You have to think about the implications of your actions.
Okay.
Like, what's the impact of the decisions you're making based on the knowledge that you have?
So it's like thinking about the bigger picture.
Exactly. And I think humility plays a big role in wisdom, too. Recognizing that you don't know everything.
Oh, so you can be intelligent and still be really arrogant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think we see that a lot, actually. People who are very intelligent, but they lack that kind of broader perspective and that self-awareness to realize that their knowledge might be limited in certain areas.
So somebody could be a genius with like a super high IQ but still make really foolish decisions?
Oh, absolutely. All the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so this has really got me thinking. If this educated ignorance is such a big concern, how do we guard against it?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, and not just in ourselves, but in like the people that we trust for information.
Well, I think a big part of it is just that awareness piece like we were talking about.
Uh-huh.
Recognizing that just because we might be educated in one area doesn't mean that we're immune to bias or misinformation in other areas.
So we all have those blind spots.
We really do.
Okay.
And I think another important thing is to actively seek out diverse viewpoints.
Oh, okay, so don't just stay in your own lane.
Exactly. Don't get stuck in an echo chamber.
Okay.
Be willing to listen to perspectives that are different from your own and actually be open to the possibility that you might be wrong.
Oh, that's hard.
It is hard.
To admit that you're wrong.
Yeah, but it's so important because that's how we learn and grow, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
And then I think another really key piece is approaching new information with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Oh, so like don't just believe everything you read.
Exactly. Just because it's in print or somebody who sounds smart said it doesn't mean it's true.
Right.
You really have to think critically about the information that you're taking in and evaluate the source.
Okay, so double check everything.
In a way, yeah.
And be willing to be wrong.
Exactly.
I love that. So basically, just don't be afraid to say, I don't know.
That's a good one.
Ask questions, be open to changing your mind.
Absolutely, because knowledge is not about having all the answers. It's about being open to learning more.
It's a journey.
It really is a lifelong journey.
This deep dive has been eye-opening.
Good.
So for anyone listening, here's something I want you to think about.
Okay.
Think about a time you might have been guilty of this educated ignorance. I mean, we've all been there.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
What did you learn from that experience, and how can it help you navigate the world with a little more wisdom, a little more humility?
Great question.
Thank you.
Something to think about.
Yeah, food for thought.
All right, folks, that's our deep dive for today. As always, keep those brains buzzing and stay curious.